Welcome to the 10th episode of the second season of The Pulpiteer. I'm your host, Eric Hepburn, and I'm glad to have you join us for today's episode. Today's episode has a slightly different structure, one that we'll be experimenting with for the next few months. We'll start with a reflection on the news of the day, have a reading and quiet reflection or meditation time, and then have our message on today's topic, how we listen. Let's get started. These are strange and awkward times. So, as Brene Brown would encourage us to do, we're going to be awkward together for a few minutes. We've got a long 3 years and 4 months ahead of us, at least. And we're getting to a point where almost every week I'm looking at my sermon topic that I had picked weeks or months before, and then trying to square it with today's news in a way that it feels like a cohesive or comprehensive thing. And some weeks that works, right? Some weeks it so happens that the news that came out and the topic I wanted to talk about dovetail quite nicely. But I think I'm going to start something new today, and we're going to try it for a few months. And that is, after joys and sorrows, we're going to have a current events moment where we talk about whatever seems to be deep in people's hearts and minds as we are passing through these troubling times. And we're going to keep that kind of separate from the deeper spiritual work that I've got planned. Does that sound like a reasonable way to try and attack both of these things at once? And then I use the word attack. You see, violence is so deep in the heart of our culture, we can't even talk about spiritual progress without using violence metaphors. It's so normalized, isn't it, folks? I'm even thinking about the most recent show that my family and I watched together. It's just a show that wouldn't even make sense if we were in a world where violence wasn't just completely normalized. Loved the show. It was a great show. Tackled many interesting human issues. So there was a political assassination this week on September 10th, the day before the 24th anniversary of the September 11th attacks. I stood up here a couple weeks ago and I said, I don't know how many people were killed in Gaza, and I don't know how many people were killed in the Ukraine. I don't know how many people were killed in our own country this week. So this morning I spent some good time with my friend ChatGPT. And on September 10th, as we're all aware, Charlie Kirk was killed by a sniper's bullet in an assassination. I think it is appropriate to call it an assassination. He was a high-profile political figure, which is more or less the only criteria for the word assassination. Doesn't mean you held elected office. It just means you had a certain level of profile in the community. The other person whose name was heavy in the news that day was a person named Chandra Nagamalia, who was the victim of a murder in Dallas. The other one that I think we would by default not think of as a victim of violence, but to my mind certainly was, is the unnamed 16-year-old child who shot 2 classmates at Evergreen High School in Colorado before turning the gun on themselves. I use the word child quite intentionally. I have a 16-year-old. I love them. They are still a child. The idea that because we let this child get a hold of a gun and they did violence, they are somehow now adults, and it's their fault, not ours, is pure fantasy. So those were 2 people who were killed on that day in the United States, whose names we know. There were 4 victims of law enforcement shootings on that day. I didn't do the research. I don't know justified, not justified, police under threat, police not under threat. I just know their names. Isaac Robinson, Malachi Romy Baumgartner, Brad Sweeney, Justin Lanier. There's something powerful about the Say Their Names campaign. What Charlie talked about a lot, and what is clear is still a part of the culture that we live in, is the idea that some people matter more than other people. Men matter more than women, white people more than people of color, Americans more than people from other places. The point of me standing here with this list and sharing it with you today, dark and grim as it might be, is to promote the opposite lesson. To promote the idea that not one of us is worth more than any other one. The three named individuals I have from the violence in the Ukraine from September 10th, 2025 are Nazar Plugator, Yuri Zhukov, and Viktor Fedorovsky. I hope their families will forgive me for butchering their names. Also reports that in various glide bomb attacks in 3 different cities, 24 to 25 civilians were killed, most of them pensioners waiting to collect pensions. There are also regional reports in the Ukraine mentioning multiple civilian deaths in Donetsk, Zaporizhia, and Kherson. Example, 7 killed, 21 killed. From Gaza and Israel on September 10th, 2025, dozens were killed in Israeli airstrikes on Gaza City. Some reports cite up to 41 people killed in those attacks. None of the stories provided a comprehensive list of individual names. I ask you one question. With the exception of the hotel murder, was not every violent killing that I just listed political? I've heard a lot of rhetoric in the last couple days about how nobody wants political violence, as if the kinds of violence which we regularly endorse, the killing by our own law enforcement of our own citizens, do you think with the racial disparities in the history of this country, that might not be a political thing? Do we think there's anything apolitical about the war in Ukraine or the genocide in Gaza? This idea that we can slap the word political on it and suddenly excuse all the other kinds of violence which we usually give a pass to is another one of those illusions that we're not going to grow past this moment without shedding. I'm going to put these on the bulletin board in the hallway before I leave today. I'm not doing it to depress you. I'm doing it just to remind you that giving a pass to some violence while maligning other kinds of violence is just a banal form of hypocrisy that we should expect better from ourselves then. State-sanctioned violence is no less violent, and the people who are dead are no less dead, and their families grieve no less, because you thought you could think of an excuse why it was okay. If murder is the best we have to offer each other, we're not doing very well. And I think we have much more to offer each other than death and judgment. I think we have love and companionship kindness and compassion, help and health and food and clothing and shelter. These are all things we can offer each other. One simple thing is what we're missing: the will to do it. That's it. We are distracted by that doesn't matter. And we take that stuff more importantly than the things that matter the most. Like the idea that America was ever great or should be again. It's just ego, friends. Whether it's you thinking you're better than somebody else, or people who have genitalia like you are better than people with the other kind, or people who have your skin color or came from the part of the world that your ancestors came from, or the people who have a passport or a driver's license that matches yours. I want you to look in your heart and ask, does any of that stuff really matter? Because I think you know it doesn't. But I've heard people in this very room, and I'm not trying to castigate you. We all know that shame is not a social justice tool. But what are you communicating when you brag about being a 7th-generation Texan? What are you bragging about? My people chose not to move. Okay, cool. That's cool. Now, we could have a deeper conversation about indigenousness, about relationship and belonging to a place. But I want to point out that there is a big walk between being indigenous to a place and having a relationship with a place and its plants and its animals and its ecology and its seasons, and having a political identity. Because I don't think being a Texan is about being indigenous to this river valley. It's about a political identity. It's about something else. So, somehow today you guys are going to get lucky and get 2 sermons, aren't you? Just the luckiest. I'm trying to justify it by splitting them into 2 parts. Lou's not going to let me get away with that. But thank you all for doing this walk with me this morning. I know it's hard today. I felt it in my bones when I woke up this morning, and there are going to be more days like this. And we have each other, and that matters. It matters that we have each other. It matters that we have a place where we can come and say the uncomfortable things that are on our heart to each other and give each other a hug and remind each other that we're not alone.
I invite you into a place of deeper stillness with this passage from Parker Palmer. Following the reading, we will have a brief period of quiet reflection, meditation, contemplation, and prayer. If we want to support each other's inner lives, we must remember a simple truth. The human soul does not want to be fixed. It wants simply to be seen and heard. If we want to see and hear a person's soul, there is another truth we must remember. The soul is like a wild animal, tough, resilient, and yet shy. When we go crashing through the woods, shouting it for it to come out so that we can help it, the soul will stay in hiding. But if we are willing to sit quietly and wait for a while, the soul may show itself.
The soul is like a wild animal, tough, resilient, yet shy. When we go crashing through the woods shouting for it to come out so we can help, the soul will stay in hiding. But if we're willing to sit quietly and wait for a while, the soul may show itself. Parker Palmer is a Quaker writer, speaker, and activist. The founder of the Center for Courage and Renewal, which fosters personal and professional integrity through programs like Courage to Teach. He holds a PhD in sociology from UC Berkeley. He's written many books on vocation, spirituality, community, and social change. He's recognized for his wisdom on living a good life, particularly in the context of aging and paradox. The two books of his that made a big difference to me in my life were The Courage to Teach and Let Your Life Speak. Now, I promise, standing in this UU pulpit, that when UUs are doing the best work out there, I'm going to bring it to you. But I want you to know that almost every deep good thing about small group ministry and Unitarian Universalism came from Parker Palmer, who's not a UU. He's a Quaker. And if we want to honor the spirit of non-appropriation, we give credit where credit is due. Unitarian Universalism is one movement among many seeking justice in this world. It's one movement among many seeking for deeper spiritual human connection. And if it's a good fit for you, as it is for me, I'm real glad you're here. But we shouldn't copy other people's stuff without giving them credit, right? That's just common human, no one of us matters more than others kind of decency. And so Parker Palmer, the Quaker, is the reason we have good small group work in Unitarian Universalism. So, in his writings, he's developed what he calls touchstones. The touchstones are the things that you have to do to create what he calls a circle of trust. And the whole point of the circle of trust is making a space still enough that the wisdom of your own soul can surface in that moment. We're going to walk through these touchstones. Not only have they helped me as a member and a facilitator in small group work, but I can't think of a single meeting I show up to these days without one or more of these touchstones coming into my mind as just the way that I want to be with other people when we're doing work together or sharing, whether it's on a board or a committee in the community, whether it's working with the committees here in this church. The first touchstone for building a circle of trust is to give and receive welcome. I want you to just close your eyes for a minute and think of a time when you walked into a small room or gathering and somebody's face just lit up to see you. That's welcome. And we've all had that moment. We know what that feels like to show up and be like, they made eye contact with me. They're glad I'm here. Not just a body, they're glad I'm here. We give and we receive. Sometimes we get to be the recipient of that light of acknowledgement. I'm glad you're here. And the right thing to do with that is to remember to give it back. Not just to them, but to everybody. Why? I'm glad you are here for this thing that we're doing together. It's such a deep and simple blessing, y'all. But how many times do you walk into a room and instead of being welcomed in, you're invited into some shared distraction and anxiety? You walk into the room and nobody makes eye contact with you because they're all just on their phone or thinking about the last news report they heard on their drive in, and they're distracted. There's a precondition to this giving and receiving welcome, which means you have to show up in the room first. You have to figure out how to get yourself present in that room before you're going to find the ability to welcome others into that space. And if you can do that, you can model that for them. And suddenly the chances of you walking into that room, maybe you're not the first one in the next time. Maybe someone will have figured that out too. And they'll be present in that room instead of thinking about what they have to do tomorrow or the next day or later that afternoon. They'll be present and they'll look at you and think, I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you're here. So we already covered bullet point number 2, be fully present. Doubts, fears, failures, successes, joys. Why do we do this joys and concerns thing every day? Every Sunday we do this. Because there might be something on your mind or your heart that's stopping you from being fully present. And we're modeling what to do if that's the case for you. It really happens, right? Folks, it happens. Some days you show up here and part of you is somewhere else because you're worried, because you're afraid, because you're sad, because you're grieving, because you're happy. You're happy that you've got a new grandbaby, but you aren't getting on a plane at that moment to go to California to see that grandbaby. But that's where your heart still is. We cast a spell in joys and concerns. We cast a spell that says, this is where my heart wishes it was. Okay, now I can be here. Number 3, respect confidentiality. I really like what Brene Brown writes about this. And now she's neither a UU nor a Quaker. She's Methodist, just in case you're curious. Yeah, one of the liberal ones, for sure. And now that I said it out loud, I'm like, she does talk about her Methodist minister, right? It's not Presbyterian. I will admit, I sometimes get confused between the Methodists and the Presbyterians. I hope they'll forgive me. But what she says is that the part of confidentiality that we're least good at is to remember the following. It's not just, Mel, you told me a secret and I didn't tell anybody. It's also this. Do I walk up to Mel and tell him things about other people that feel like I should have kept that to myself? Brene Brown calls it the vault. Our trustworthiness with other people's secrets is not just how well you kept that one person's secrets. It's what kind of things do you talk about with them about other folks? Just something to think about. So, when we have a good vault, when we're not sharing inappropriate things with others, we put marbles in the jar so that people know that we're trustworthy to share hard things with. And when we're loose-lipped and we want to create a moment of, hey, did you see what Joe did? Takes marbles out of the jar, even if that's not what you meant to do. Something to keep in mind. Speak your truth. Number 4, speak your truth. Use I statements to speak from your own personal experience rather than generalizing or speaking on behalf of others. Number 5. This is a big one. It's a toughie. No fixing, advising, or correcting. Oh, man. Why am I even here? Man, if I can't fix all y'all, what am I doing up here? Don't you know that's why I showed up this morning? I thought, I'm going to fix this whole church full of people this morning. It's going to be great. No fixing, advising, or correcting. This is one of the most vital rules. Instead of offering counsel, members are encouraged to simply witness, receive, and honor what others have said. Witness, receive, and honor what others have said. Respond with honest and open questions. Instead of giving advice, ask honest questions that have no predetermined agenda. This helps others dig deeper into their own thoughts. Here's one of the key pieces of Parker Palmer's wisdom that I think you can deduce from these rules, but I want to make it explicit for you. That still small voice of wisdom within each of us is where the answers to our hard problems are. The purpose of small group is not to get people around you who are smarter than you or more insightful than you to tell you how to fix your problems. That's not what we're doing. What we're doing is a supportive group to help your shy, wily soul come out of hiding and help you see the answers in your own life. To learn to build a trust relationship with your own wisdom in supportive community. Man, the first day that I had been doing small group work for several years before the full weight of that teaching landed on my head one day, and I was like, wait, what? You mean I'm not here to do it for other people? I'll tell you, for me, the hardest part to swallow was the idea that after a lifetime of being told otherwise, that there was a part of me that was truly trustworthy. Do you see it? Maybe in the way that you were treated in school or by your parents, by the larger culture, that mistrust of yourself was a core message that got drilled into you over and over again. It's literally so pervasive, it was part of the founding philosophy of this country. You have certainly heard of the Leviathan. That author wrote that human beings were inherently untrustworthy, and that the only way around it was to set up a state capable of wielding violence against them to keep them in line. How's that working for us? Those were not I statements, Eric. When it gets rough, and it will, turn to wonder. Ooh. When it gets rough, and it will, turn to wonder. Open up your curiosity to that moment. If you start to feel judgmental or defensive, turn to compassionate inquiry by asking questions like, I wonder what brought them to this belief. Brene Brown tool again. Say more. Just say more. Tell me more about that thing that you just said. Trust and learn from the silence. Trust and learn from the silence. Treat silence as a valuable part of the group process. After someone speaks, allow a time for quiet reflection instead of rushing in to fill the space. I will make a side note here that in order to do that, you've got to learn to tame those voices in your head from the past telling you that you're not doing nothing right now. What's wrong with you? Why aren't you busy? Why aren't you active? Why aren't you doing something? You're not doing anything. It's just quiet. I can't stand it. I can't stand it. I can't stand it. Listen for your inner teacher. Pay close attention to your own reactions and responses. The group setting is an opportunity for you to learn from your own inner wisdom. It helps a little bit if you believe that you have some. Just accept it as a proposition. What if I lived as if I do have some inner wisdom just for a while and see what that feels like? This one's really important. It makes me think of the work of Marshall Rosenberg. It is an invitation, not a demand. Participation in small group, participation in a conversation is invited and not demanded. The group is not share or die, and members can contribute according to their own needs or availability to be present. I'm going to tie this into our political moment that we had earlier because I think it's important, but I'm going to do it quickly. So Saturday morning consisted of my son and I watching a bunch of Charlie Kirk videos, mostly because he was curious and he said, "Dad, will you watch these with me because I don't understand some of the things that they're saying?" So we would watch for a little while and then we would pause the video and have a conversation about what was being said. One of the things that came up in our conversation was that there is a big difference between having a conversation and having a debate. There's a big difference between me showing up with you and wanting to understand you as a human being and me showing up and wanting to prove that I'm right over you. So when I hear people talk about Charlie Kirk's legacy as a legacy of wanting to be in conversation about, I just have to say, with all due empathy, no, that's not what was happening. Showing up to show how clever you are and how right you are with words and showing up to understand another person are not the same thing. And what Parker Palmer is inviting us to is to figure out some tools so that we can really show up to understand one another. And as the last one indicates, it has to be consensual. Nobody can make you participate. And if there's any coercion involved, your still shy soul is just going to hide away. But I think these tools, if practiced, could give you a way to sit down with compassion and curiosity with anyone. To say, I'm glad you're here in this moment. I'm glad you are here in this moment. Are you willing to sit with me because I'd like to understand you? I don't want to treat you as a scapegoat for all the other people who identify with you. I want to understand you. Because our hearts are big enough to hold that if we can get our minds out of the way. Amen. Until next time, thank you for joining us on The Pulpiteer. If you enjoyed the podcast, you can help others find it by liking and subscribing. If you'd like to support the podcast directly, you can make a donation at sangabrieluu.org/give. The Pulpiteer Podcast is a production of the San Gabriel Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Georgetown, Texas. The podcast is hosted by Spotify, and theme music is by John Faber. Our live recording tech crew this week was Frank Sanders, Rob Berthold, Keith Hutchinson, and Andrew McDaniel. Our reading was performed by Pat Berthold. The podcast is produced and performed by Eric Hepburn.